Let's go ahead and introduce.
Good evening, and I'm Paula King, and glad to see everybody here. Thanks for joining Seattle Friends of Fishing for what we think is going to be a fun and definitely interesting evening, where you get to ask questions of the speakers and ask all your questions you have about nuclear power. So after each of the speakers come to your breakout rooms, we'll meet back here in our waiting room for just a short discussion of a couple of specific actions you can do to support clean, safe, and abundant nuclear power. And then we'll open the chat rooms back up again, and you can move around and talk with folks just casually. So I'm going to introduce our four speakers. First, Dr. Jim Conca. He's a scientist, waving his hand there, in the field of earth and environmental sciences for 33 years, specializing in geologic disposal of nuclear waste, energy-related research, planetary surface processes, radiobiology, and shielding for space colonies, subsurface transport, and environmental cleanup of heavy metals. He consults with the Department of Energy and EPA and state environmental agencies and industry, including companies that own nuclear, hydro, wind farms, large solar arrays, coal and gas plants. And he also consults for EPA and state environmental agencies and industry on cleanup of heavy metals from soil and water. So he writes a weekly column for Forbes.com, and they're always great, on energy and the environment. And Jim tonight's going to focus on nuclear waste. And our next speaker, Dr. Nick Duran, a nuclear engineer. Is he waving somewhere, I assume? Nuclear engineer in Seattle, developing technical solutions to world energy challenges. He's working on the design of an advanced nuclear reactor for a nuclear innovation company called TerraPower. He's a clean energy activist, environmentalist, and fascinated with all electronics. He developed and maintains his website, whatisnuclear.com, to educate folks and answers questions sent to him. So Nick's going to focus on floating nuclear power plants tonight, though he can talk about lots of different things. He just posted a video talking about floating plants for decarbonization. You can ask him about that. Next, Scott Montgomery. He's an author, geologist, and affiliate faculty member in the Jackson School of International Studies, University of Washington. He writes, teaches, and lectures on a wide variety of topics related to energy, geopolitics, resources, nuclear power, climate change, also American politics, intellectual history, language and communication, and the history of science. So he currently writes a column on energy issues for the journal Global Policy. He'll focus on nuclear in the US and its growing world in global energy. And Madison Chewinski is joining us from, I think it's Chicago. You can correct me in a minute if I'm wrong. Madison Chewinski is the founder and executive director of Campaign for a Green Nuclear Deal. We're glad to have her join us tonight. Madison began her career fighting for nuclear power as a researcher, analyst, then as executive vice president for Environmental Progress. It's a pro-nuclear research and policy organization in Berkeley, California. She supported and co-authored analyses that have been cited in Forbes, The Washington Post, USA Today, and the New York Times. Madison has traveled with and advised policymakers and journalists around the world, including in France, Germany, Netherlands, United Kingdom, Taiwan, and South Korea. Her organizing efforts built a coalition of industry and civil society that led to the world's largest pro-nuclear demonstration, Stand Up for Nuclear. And Seattle Friends of Fission has joined that demonstration for the last 2 years. She's presented her work at the 2019 Atom Expo International Forum, the 2019 International Uranium Fuel Seminar, and the SLAC National Accelerator Laboratory. So Madison holds degrees in environmental sciences and political science from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Okay, so Madison, please. Just before we go to our breakout rooms, we're going to ask her to give us a short preview of the campaign for a green nuclear deal.
Sure. Thank you so much, Paula. So as you just heard, I started my career fighting for nuclear energy as a young environmentalist. And a lot of that work involved traveling around the world, organizing local advocacy efforts, meeting with journalists, really providing that environmental voice for nuclear power. And I started 2020 the same as I had, been almost every year for the past 5 years, which was a few trips planned, a few op-eds being written, drafts that I was getting ready to publish when coronavirus hit and we were all kind of sheltering in place in the Bay Area. And I sort of turned my free time attention to really examining what was going on. We were in the midst of this unprecedented, or at least in recent history, pandemic, and it didn't seem like we had the capabilities and competencies to properly deal with this. And the former Treasury or Secretary of the Treasury under Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, really put it best when he asked on Twitter, how come the wealthiest nation in the world can't produce their own ventilators, masks, and PPE? And this sort of stopped me in my tracks because that's the same question I had and was trying to, furiously read about and figure out. And this seems very unrelated to nuclear, but it sort of confirmed a lot of my fears about nuclear in the US, which is that this industry is clearly, declining. We have lost 7 gigawatts of clean, reliable baseload nuclear power since 2013. Exelon, which has the reputation for being one of the best nuclear operators in the world, is shutting its plants, trying to get subsidies where it can, and shutting down its nuclear plants where it can't. The cancellation of the VC Summer project in South Carolina bankrupted Westinghouse. And while we still will get 2 new AP1000 reactors out of Georgia, we are on track to lose 4.5 times as much nuclear capacity as we built by 2025. And I realized that these issues are not, solely belonging to the nuclear industry, that there's clearly this broader problem that the deindustrialization of America and the loss of manufacturing has eroded American prosperity and left us without the capability and competencies to deal with problems that we face. And I think has really fragilized our economy in a significant way. So this all had me thinking about, why am I really traveling around the world when we have this crisis at home and it goes beyond this very important energy and environmental issue, but the broader economy, and has pretty significant implications about our way of life. So that's why I decided to leave environmental progress and found the Campaign for a Green Nuclear Deal. So the Campaign for a Green Nuclear Deal is a nationwide advocacy effort to articulate a new vision for nuclear power, and namely for nuclear growth. I think a lot of the conversation about nuclear in the US has focused on technologies, like which technologies are we going to pursue in the future, but has sort of missed this important bridge, which is that new technologies and advancements and innovation don't come from industries that are in decline. They come from industries that are thriving and growing and have a national commitment and are publicly acceptable and recognized as important. So that's sort of the reason that I decided to start this campaign for a green nuclear deal. And I don't want to take up too much time, so I look forward to sort of talking more about what that is, the work we're doing, and how to get involved in the breakout rooms.
Great, everyone. I am going to now, let's see, I will have to pin myself. You're going to talk to me and only me, because we are just about to go into our breakout rooms. You will have room 1 will be Madison Chewinski, room 2, Jim Conca, room 3, Scott Montgomery, room 4, Nick Duran. We're going to enable chat and let you turn on your microphones as soon as those rooms are joined. And also we're going to trust our moderators and trust each other. We're going to have productive, friendly conversations. If anyone's being unfriendly or disruptive, you'll get moved around, or perhaps you might need to leave the presentation. So let's all be friends here. So I'm going to open rooms now. So if you'll look in your Zoom interface, you should see at the bottom of your screen breakout rooms. Please join your breakout room. Great work, everyone. I see the names flying off the screen. About a dozen left. About 6 left. About 4 left. Is anyone unassigned? Is anyone unassigned? Two left. You should be able to unmute yourself now if there's any issues.
I seem to only be able to join breakout room 1.
Yes. So what we're going to do is you're going to the speakers are going to rotate so that you don't have to rotate yourself.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Great. John, are you able to join your breakout room? John, you have been assigned to breakout room number 4. See if you can press that button and join breakout room number 4. I'm going to go check in on one of our rooms. Excellent.
Couple of levels, obviously working at the state level where we can. Right now, that's where the battle to keep a lot of our existing nuclear plants online are. But also looking to gain support nationally at the federal level to get 50% of our electricity from nuclear power by 2050. That's the target that we are trying to get politicians to sign on. In terms of what the Green Nuclear Deal actually is, obviously the Green New Deal was created by legislators and thus is a bill. We wanted to keep the Green Nuclear Deal as broad as possible. I am not a policy wonk or don't have experience writing actual legislation. So what we decided to do instead is create a set of policy principles. So what would a green nuclear deal have to include for it to earn this name? So one is it would have to have a mechanism to protect the existing fleet. Everywhere around the country, our currently operating nuclear plants are under threat either from market failure or from state politics. And at this point, it's just not acceptable to be losing baseload clean capacity that could continue to run for decades. It also involves a national commitment to a build out. Right now, I think America's greatest industrial asset are the men and women who are working on the Vogtle reactors in Georgia. So a lot of historical build outs involve using the same construction crews, management teams to travel to different sites to continue building reactors. And right now we have no plans to capitalize on the experience gained building the two AP1000s at Vogtle. So I think that certainly needs to change. So there are 6 total involving, developing and deploying advanced nuclear technologies, working with allies to export nuclear technologies and continue to electrify countries that don't have access to clean energy. And so right now we're in the works, or what's in the works is talking to politicians at the federal level on the importance of nuclear and the importance for an industrial policy around nuclear, that the government cannot take a backseat to this, that we really have to be proactive and working with the industry if we want to have this revival in the way we feel is important.
Excellent. All right. So at this point, I'm going to open it up to questions just to kind of keep everything organized. If you open up your participant window, and you'll see a few buttons down at the bottom. If you have a question that you would like to ask directly, just go ahead and you should be able to see a little button that says yes. That'll let me know that you have a question to ask. If you'd rather not ask in person, feel free to use the chat. I will be keeping an eye on that as well. So if anyone has a question right now, go ahead and if you can use that yes button in the participant window, we will, I'll gladly unmute you so you can ask your question, and then we'll see what Madison has to say. All right, Blaine was the first one, so you can go ahead and unmute.
Hello, good evening. I actually work at Energy Northwest, and I'm actually the head of our young generation in nuclear there, even though not exactly young anymore. And we're wondering how we could get involved with your project, what you could see from us. We are the only reactor in Washington now, but we have the potential to go for SMRs going forward. So we're looking to get involved.
That's so great to hear. Yeah, so there are definitely a couple of ways. First of all, as a group, right now I'm working on building state pages so that people who become interested in nuclear or hear about nuclear or sort of like trying to figure out what's going on where they live can click on their state and get an FAQ, sort of an energy analysis, like what's your energy mix? Do you have nuclear? What's the status of nuclear in your state? And then I like to highlight advocacy organizations that you can reach out to because, right now I am one person and I have 2 other people helping me on the campaign, but it's very hard to, have the full in-depth picture of what's happening at the state level in a lot of these places. So I love to just point to people doing great work and doing this advocacy. So first of all, there's the ability to either have individuals or organizations act as a state coordinator, which just means you get either your logo or your face and are just open to the possibility of people reaching out to you to ask questions like, oh, I found your information on the website. What's going on? Another thing is just like building out our network, especially at, both levels. At the state level, I think we're all fighting very similar battles, either to, allow our states to pursue new nuclear, to keep existing nuclear online. We're facing a lot of the same obstacles and forces. So it would be great if we could have one sort of unified voice in that, and that people in Illinois who are fighting to save Byron and Dresden nuclear power plants from premature closure this year are also speaking out on behalf of Indian Point Power Plant. And that all of those groups and individuals are working hard in states to repeal anti-nuclear legislation that prevents new builds. So I think part of it too is just creating this network that is involved and recognizes that a threat to nuclear in any given state is a threat to nuclear across the country, and that we should really try to create this unified voice. So I would love to be able to feature, I understand that you might need group approval, but, set up a call, talk to your organization or your board, talk through some of those options, put you on the website, have you signing open letters that we create, have you in meetings that we put together, educating legislators about either the Green Nuclear Deal or just the importance of protecting nuclear in general. So it can be individuals, it can be organizations. We're also trying really hard to get the labor unions involved. I think that's been a key constituency that hasn't really been tapped yet. They've been instrumental in Illinois in organizing their communities and really speaking out on behalf of the plants and reaching out to state legislators. But I think they're often overlooked at the advocacy level, which, I think there are a couple of reasons for that, but I don't think that has helped us. Certainly, I think it's quite hurt us. So we're trying to just get as many people on board to show that this is good for communities, this is good for our country, this is good, obviously, for the planet, that we have this role.
Excellent. Thank you.
Kevin,
So first, there we go. Yep. All right. So we got a question in chat from Wendy. It may not quite be your wheelhouse, but I will ask it and see if you want to address it. So she says, I'm open-minded on nuclear as a carbon alternative, but I'm not pro because I'm not convinced it's safe or that we've solved the problem of nuclear waste. Do you care to address my concerns? So I'm going to open this up to you, but just so everyone knows, Jim Conca will be on a little bit later in this breakout room, and he is an expert who will be able to address this in a more direct way, perhaps. But Maddie, feel free to address that if you'd like, and then after that, we'll have Mike B ask his question.
Totally. So I can give just a sort of overview, and then any more specific questions, feel free to ask me. Or like Kevin said, I'm sure Jim has written on this a lot and is going to be a great resource. So there are a lot of sort of hangups that I face when talking to people about nuclear, specifically because it has this sort of ominous tie to weapons, and there's a lot of confusion when we talk about it. And I think sort of that impacts people's perception of its safety and the safety of the nuclear waste. Actually, there have been a lot of peer-reviewed journals. One of them that comes to mind is the medical journal Lancet, that shows that nuclear energy is by far the safest way we have to produce abundant, clean, reliable energy, especially when you're looking at death per unit of electricity generation. for example, fossil fuels, they kill 7 million people, I think is the current number, prematurely each year due to ambient air pollution. That number is so large that nuclear to date has actually saved over 2 million lives just from displacing coal and natural gas usage. The few accidents that we have had have been extremely small death-wise over the amount of electricity that nuclear has generated. So you hear about 3 Mile Island, nobody actually died. Fukushima, no one died from radiation or from anything related to the nuclear meltdown. It was actually the fear of radiation and the evacuation of Fukushima, the prefecture, that led to those deaths. I mean, you imagine pulling people out of nursing homes. And that's not to mention that the disaster, the tsunami that actually came ahead of that, took many tens of thousands of lives. So in terms of safety, I think this is just something that, we hear about. Certainly, it's a lot of Cold War fears and anti-nuclear movement. I don't want to say propaganda because the industry certainly hasn't done a good job of communicating with the public and engaging with the public on education. But it's actually one of the safest ways we have to produce electricity. In terms of the waste, I'm a young environmentalist and I love talking about nuclear waste because for me, it's its chief selling point. Like I mentioned before, fossil fuels, the problem is they obviously are very polluting, but it's not just carbon emissions, it's dangerous air pollution that comes into people's lungs and there's no way to contain it. I mean, we have technology that makes that helps keep those pollutants from going into the natural environment, but they're still there. In terms of renewables, solar, wind, batteries, a lot of these things are very resource intensive, and we don't currently have a way to store those materials when these generation assets are retired in 20 to 30 years. So nuclear is the only form of electricity generation that contains its waste, which is great so that it doesn't leach into the natural environment. But also because uranium is so dense, there's so little of it. So all of the electricity generated across the American nuclear industry could fit on a football field about 30 feet high. I know my plants in Illinois, they have a little concrete slab that's just about the size of an end zone in the football field. And the used fuel rods are stored in dry casks, like big kind of concrete containers that just sit there. And they're not harmful to anybody. They've never hurt anyone. They don't leach into the environment. Frankly, they could just stay put and we would have no problems. So I think actually the waste is, from an environmental perspective, one of my favorite parts about nuclear power.
And while you were speaking, I have my Google Earth that I regularly show Blaine's plant. So Blaine, do you have anything you'd like to say about these dry storage casks here at the Columbia Generating Station?
Yeah, so just FYI, Carl, we can't currently see your screen. It's just a thin white band across it.
Let me fix that.
Yep.
How about that? Better?
Yes, there we go.
Great. So yeah, there's Columbia Generating Station, and I've asked you to unmute if you want to speak on this at all, Blaine.
Sure. It's a pretty neat process where they take the fuel that's been sitting in basically a swimming pool for a few years. We pull it out, put it into giant steel cylinders that they've used calculations from people way smarter than me to make sure that it will not activate again or not become critical again. And they drain the water out, and then they dry it out with it's a hydrogen drying skid. I don't remember, hydrogen or helium, probably helium, so that there's no air in there whatsoever. They dry it for hours and hours, and it's a very loud process. And then after that is done, they take them and put them into giant concrete cylinders that you see there on the pads. So those are they're probably about the size of a sedan standing up. We can put a stand on its end. That's what you would get. And then we use this giant tank looking crawler thing that hauls them off to the pad, and they just sit there. They're bolted down to the ground for seismic reasons. And yeah, they're passively cooled by airflow. There's vents at the tops and bottoms of them, so they stay cool. And we take routine readings on them, make sure that everything's good to go.
There's Jim walking next to the this is official video from Energy Northwest. You can check it out, and that's Jim, who will be rotating around in about an hour, and you'll be able to speak to Jim about this process as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Carl. All right, Mike B., I noticed you have tags, so if you'd like to go ahead and unmute and ask your question, feel free.
Sure. My background is I'm a retired naval officer from the submarine and nuclear weapons community, and also I'm a retired radiation health physicist from the state of Washington. In fact, I have upon a time put environmental TLDs on the fence around the dry cask storage area as part of my duty. But and it's more of a comment that, okay, I have the fairly typical Navy, shall we say, lack of enthusiasm for boiling water reactors as opposed to pressurized water reactors. And my comment is that rather than trying to keep the current boiling water reactors going, I think that focusing on replacing that capacity with Generation 4 reactors that use 50 years technological advances would be a very useful focus.
Sure. I would just say that right now, nuclear power makes up 20% of our electricity mix. And currently, we use a lot of coal and fossil fuels to produce our electricity in the US. So rather than talking about replacing nuclear with nuclear, which even our boiling water reactors still can run for decades, I would rather be displacing fossil fuels. So I definitely think there's a role for Generation 4 and advanced reactor technologies. Russia is certainly, leaps and bounds ahead of us in terms of deploying these and demonstrating these reactors. So it's not a matter of technical, whether it's technically possible. It's just, do we have the manufacturing and commitment and capability to build those ourselves? And I think that we can. Obviously, that's why I'm campaigning around the green nuclear deal. But I think we can preserve our existing fleet and build out these advanced reactors. And it doesn't have to be an either or for that technology.
So if you don't mind, unfortunately, I'm going to have to cut you off. And I think am I right in that we started this room around 7:18 and now it is 7:38. So I'm going to move Maddie into room 2, and I will follow her and continue the process. You folks, you will see Nick Duran in just a moment. Bye.
Awesome. Thank you, Carl.
Like, falling off a ladder.
Well, it looks like Maddie's arrived.
And
All
I'm
right.
going to take Jim with me, and we're going to go to
Goodbye.
room 3.
Thanks, Jim.
I hope you had a wonderful conversation.
Yes,
Thank you,
good
Jim.
questions. Good questions. Thanks, Kurt. Thanks.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Maddie.
Very favorable.
Great. Scott, I'm keeping an eye on the time here. I think we're going to lose you here in a minute. I'm a little unsure how these transitions might go. So I just want to thank you.
I'm going to do it myself. How's that? So
Thank you,
Bye,
I'm going
Scott.
to
Bye,
grab
Scott.
Scott
Hey, Jim.
and take him to room 4.
Fantastic. All right. Well, that
See you
answers my
around.
question.
So I'm here to talk about nuclear waste or anything you really want to talk about, but nuclear waste always seems to be the big deal, right? Everyone.
Let's see, who do we have here?
Well, there's about 9 or 10 of us, I believe. And
Oh, good.
we just were talking with Nick. Why don't you do a super brief intro again so people remember which one you were?
Which one am I? I'm a prof at the UW. I teach courses in energy there for grad students and undergrad students. I was a petroleum geologist in the working for the great Satan, as many people feel, for about
right next to it, and so we can see the land versus power requirements of those. So the actual nuclear reactor, from the looks of it, I'm guessing was this building right here. These were the cooling towers for that. So we can see, how much space this area took up compared to the natural gas plant and the rather large solar array. So at least from a land use perspective, the amount of power generated for amount of land used does seem quite clearly differentiated there. I don't know if you had a little more information to inject there, Alfred, but feel free if you'd like to while we're waiting. Oh, actually, looks like Nick is on. Sorry, I missed that. All right, so.
Oh, it was great.
All right.
Why
So
don't
should
you
I just do
reintroduce
my-
yourself? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, I missed you coming in there. I
No,
apologize.
no problem. I didn't want to interrupt. Okay, so yeah, hi everyone. I'm excited to be here. My name is Nick Duran. I'm a nuclear engineer. Came from University of Michigan, 10 years of school there or so, and then moved to Seattle, where I've been working on advanced nuclear design engineering for the last 12 years. Along the way, I've always ran my little website, whatisnuclear.com, which used to be one of the top hits for nuclear waste and got a lot of traffic. And now it's kind of like a few thousand, it's like 1,000 hits a day. Not bad for a fringe site, but anyway, the topic that I am hosting, which you can choose to talk about or not, is a sort of unconventional topic of offshore nuclear power stations. And there's two very interesting things about offshore nuclear plants. One is that you build them in a shipyard, and when you build things in a shipyard, you can accelerate learning. You have a permanent construction infrastructure, permanent cranes, permanent labor force. And so those people learn all the lessons and then just build the same exact thing again and again and again. It's like it's like a assembly line for gigawatt scale reactor, low carbon energy sources. And so in terms of decarbonizing rapidly, it's one of the most potentially exciting things you can do. So it's like, forget about small modular reactors. This is like large modular reactors. So you get both economies of scale and economies of mass production. So it's kind of an ultimate
win there. And then when you actually operate offshore, which is optional, you can build reactors in a shipyard, float them to a shoreline, and then build land around, build an island, or cover it with, make it a terrestrial plant. But actually operating offshore has some interesting advantages as well. You're decoupled from the ground, so there's no earthquakes, and there's weather, but waves are nothing compared to a big earthquake. So it's much easier to survive weather than it is to survive a huge earthquake. And of course, tsunamis, if you're in deep enough water, tsunami wavelength is a few hundred miles long, and so the ocean just goes up and down. You don't even know that the tsunami happened. And of course, you're highly coupled to a very intimate you're intimately coupled to an infinitely large heat sink, the ocean. So if you have any loss of power or something goes wrong and you have to cool your reactor without any backup systems, no problem, because there you are floating out in a big thing of cold water, a lot colder than a melting core. So anyway, the risk of meltdowns almost goes to zero. No earthquakes, no tsunamis, and you get factory construction. So it's like you get better safety, better cost. It's like a triple win. It sounds, if it still sounds crazy, I should mention that in the 70s in the United States, there was a massive effort to build offshore nuclear plants. It was called the Offshore Power Systems Facility. And I did a talk for the National Academy speaker series just 2 days ago. That'll be on YouTube soon, fully summarizing this whole story. But what's interesting is in Jacksonville, Florida, they started building a manufacturing facility that would make 4 gigawatt scale pressurized water reactors per year. They actually did enough environmental study that they literally got a license from the NRC to manufacture the first 8 of these reactors, so 2 years worth of them. The license was granted in 1982 after a whole lot of work and a lot of environmental study. So it's real. They were going to build gigawatt scale light water reactors, and the facility itself, they dredged it out. They bought the world's largest gantry crane, installed it. Of course, didn't complete the facility. Customers ran out. The energy demand was expected to be exponential at the time, but it actually went flat. And so all the customers who they had signed up canceled their orders, and they had to shut down. So it's a sad story, but it's also encouraging now that we have climate change and air pollution issues. You want to decarbonize fast. This is an interesting idea. So anyway, I'll stop there and see if anyone wants.
So we have an interesting comment in chat, and you get a new Discovery Channel series, Extreme Ocean Power Workers.
Yeah, exactly. which piracy will be a new one.
Oh wow, nuclear piracy. That'll be an interesting.
The movies would be great.
Yeah. So does anyone? Oh, okay. Looks like Mike has a question. So feel free to ask that.
Yeah, I come from the submarine community, and I often felt that when a nuclear-powered submarine or aircraft carrier was being decommissioned, the best way to do it would be bring it into a likely port, hook up the shore power cables, and keep the reactor critical until you simply couldn't pull the control rods far enough out to keep it going, which would, if nothing else, get people used to the idea of waterborne reactors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I never thought about that. That's an interesting idea. We had a submariner in the other room. That's fun.
Well, and it's been done in Hawaii at least twice that I know, after typhoons.
Yeah. Okay. And one of my slides had there's a picture in Haiti in 2010 when an aircraft carrier did something similar. The Carl Vinson rolled in 2 days and started. They were giving desalinated water. They were using their desal facility to provide potable water, but similar.
Yeah,
I love that.
There's a lot that you can do with a near infinite amount of electricity available.
That's right. Yeah. Good point. I love that idea. Thanks.
All right, so we have a few questions here. I noticed Sean says he's having some issue or some trouble finding the green check mark. If you open the participants window, it should be there. But at the moment, the list I have is Carl, Eugene, Diego, and then Sean. So I'm just going to go ahead and clear out those markers. So Carl.
We can't hear you.
There we
You
go.
are mute.
There it is. There it
You
is.
dropped a bombshell on us, saying the movie about security at the high seas would be really fantastic. What do you imagine the IAEA is going to say about floating nuclear reactors?
Well, there already is one. There's currently one operating up in the Arctic Ocean called the Akademik Lomonosov. It just started operating a few months ago, and the Russians built it, and the Russians operate it to power a remote village. And so the IAEA is kind of already like, all right, we're aware of this, and there are plans in China and Korea as well to like build these types of things. Well, smallish ones, 100, it's big but not huge, 100 megawatts, 200 megawatts. Compared to these offshore power systems, which were gigawatt scale. The legal implications and all the regulatory regime around having like, a vendor that you can buy them from and float them to different countries, that's very complicated and needs a lot of work. It's certainly not fully hashed out by any means. I did talk to a legal team about it at one point, and they said, when a lawyer says, boy, you could really make a career out of this. It's a complicated thing, but I think there's plenty of reason to think it's feasible, but it's not like trivial. I won't claim that it's trivial. I don't know if that answers the question. All right.
Next up was Eugene in chat. So he asks, can you draw parallels with offshore nuclear and offshore wind? Could the two technologies be used together, and could vertical farming in the sea benefit from localized power sources?
Interesting concept. Well, in terms of offshore wind, there is one synergy already is the ongoing development of like more and more subsea cabling of higher and higher power. So like subsea cable of high power for transmitting the electricity is like a totally done deal, and it sort of was before lots of offshore wind as well, because there's like islands and stuff that have subsea cables. So anyway, that's one place if they could kind of go together. I do think that like anything offshore, like offshore wind, most people have a generally positive view of. I think like 80% of people or something do. So like maybe that could help when you're talking about offshore something else. Maybe that'll help say like, well, it's not the first time anyone's done something like that. Synergies. Yeah, I mean, if you co-located them, you could sort of have, and if you put like some kind of thermal storage or, some kind of energy storage system on the nuclear plant, you could have it help balance the wind turbine, the wind turbine. So you could sort of have a higher power overall system using the wind most of the time. It's probably blowing 50% of the time in good sites. And then the vertical farming. So that's a super interesting idea. And I have not thought or studied that in detail, so I can't say too much intelligently, but certainly concentrated power does enable a lot of pretty interesting things. So in places where you're really low on land and for farming and energy, I could certainly imagine that like co-locating those things might be pretty interesting. And certainly like the nuclear plant could provide high steam, which would help the greenhouse stay warm all the time, which could be pretty good. It's easy to make low grade. It's just waste heat usually from a nuclear reactor. So if you can find a use for the waste heat in farming, that's pretty cool. So that might be a good idea.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Diego. Feel free to unmute and ask your question.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so shifting gears a little bit, my background is in IT, and I was curious about your perspective as somebody who's worked with doing system administrator work. If there's any sort of different or maybe unique, unexpected challenges or opportunities that you've seen in this field.
Great. I'm so glad you asked. So first of all, my sysadmin stuff is pretty amateur. Like I run my one little website, my email server and stuff. And Lord knows it's probably not the best run thing in the world. But I spend a ton of time, especially more recently, thinking about the like IT implications of nuclear design and construction. And actually, I believe it's funny you ask, because in the last year or so, I've decided or concluded that IT-related elements are instrumental to the future design and implementation of nuclear projects. And part of the issue is, nuclear it's a lot of the plants were built long ago, and there's microfiche, and there's all this work. There's tons of work. Part of the reason nuclear plants operating right now is expensive is because they haven't fully leveraged modern IT. So like, for instance, if you go and change out a pump or a valve, and oops, that valve doesn't exist anymore on the market, and you have to get something that's going to replace it, but it has a little bit different characteristics. Well, you got to go back and find out, why was that valve there, and what was its entire design basis? What are all the calculations going into it? Who was the supplier? Like all the different margins and uncertainties. And so they hire like teams of 15 people to go through, scan microfiche stuff, dig through it, try to find what the design basis is. And like, if only they had a relational database that linked, a part with its requirements and the supporting analysis, it'd be a click instead of a 15-person thing. And so, so like the opportunity is huge, and the industry itself has like understood this and written about it at length. And there is a document that's freely available at the IAEA website that's called IAEA Tech Doc. That's TECDOC 1651. See if I can put a link to it. I actually have it open. And it talks about IT needs in nuclear power. So I'll just read
Quick
that.
Question. Is everyone in this room seeing my broadcast message?
I did see it, yes.
I saw
great.
it.
Great.
All right. I put a link in the chat. So there you go. That's the revolutionary IT needs for nuclear power. And like building some open source version of this is like one of the best ideas ever. Right. Oh, awesome. Next question.
So next up, I think we had Sean. So you are unmuted, but we can't hear you, Sean. So there might be like a hardware mute.
I put up my mic. All right. So my question is kind of on the similar topic of the vertical farming question on co-locating applications on these offshore plants. Mm-hmm. And mostly it's about everyone's saying this whole thing about we need negative emissions and pulling CO2 out of the air.
Yeah.
So what's the potentiality of using your offshore plants for doing CO2 extraction from the ocean and then using just the ocean as our CO2 kind of reaction surface to pull it out of the air?
Okay, so that's another super interesting question that I haven't thought much about. And yeah, so you're saying like if it's easier to pull out of the water, if there's maybe a higher concentration or a more efficient separation process, and then let the air CO2 go into the ocean and then get it out of there. So at first blush, I love the idea. I think that would be like another really interesting kind of research topic on this overall issue, on this overall topic that could, if it turns out to look good, that could really bolster the concept as well. Because yeah, you can use once through cooling on these types of things when you're away from most of the fish and stuff. You can actually discharge water at higher than normal temperature, which means you can pull in just like a ridiculous amount of water and heat it up and let it out. And so if you could, while you're at it, do some CO2 extraction, that could indeed be pretty interesting. And along those lines, I should say on these the offshore power systems design, they had at the inlet, they had this big like rake structure. It was like, imagine like a massive chain link fence on a conveyor belt. And its job was to pull garbage out before it got into the inlet. And so as a side effect, it cleans garbage out of the ocean, like while it's operating, which I think is just another kind of fun.
Oh man, that actually reminds me of, as much as people hate the fact of mixing Simpsons and nuclear in this field, it reminds me of that one episode of The Simpsons where he's just got, Mr. Burns has that giant like chain link fence that pulls animals in out of the ocean and turns them into paste.
Yeah, I guess that would be the challenge, is you got to like somehow separate out the poor animals that might get in it. But yeah, anyway, good point. Yeah, it is like The Simpsons.
Simpsons did it.
Damn it.
Yeah, great Eugene in chat said Elon Musk is giving millions to the best decarbonization process, which is interesting. I did not know that.
I heard that.
So we have a few more minutes here. If anyone has a quick question to ask, feel free to shoot that out there. Oh, Sean, looks like you may have had another question.
Oh, no, sorry. I just clicked mine.
No worries.
And I should mention, I think I said this, but like 2 days ago, I gave this like virtual talk to this speaker series that the National Academy puts on, and they recorded it, and they have a YouTube version of it that they're just like editing or something right now. And so there will be a YouTube version that's like an hour-long spiel with all my slides saying like, nuclear offshore is an interesting and fun idea. So I don't know if that'll be easy to find. But
Mike said something interesting in chat. It'd probably be easier to bring nutrient-rich water to the surface as part of the cooling process, and then let plants use the CO2 and critters eat it, turning the CO2 into biomass. And that made me think, since the vast majority of oxygen in our atmosphere today is produced via algae, you could almost turn these plants into giant algae pools, essentially.
Yeah, with all that extra heat, you could probably make a pretty incredible like algae bioreactor alongside
finding a way to use the waste heat a little more productively than just shooting it into the atmosphere.
Yeah. That's actually a great point as well. Yeah, I love it. So many good ideas.
I'm very sorry to
write
break
all this
in.
down. Yeah,
that's all good. I think we just about wrapped up, so feel free to switch things around as needed.
I'll see you in room 2, Nick.
Sort of goes back to the attention question, which is it's a little easier for us to get attention because it's a bit novel to be pro-nuclear environmentalists, which is cool. So that's sort of like David and Goliath sort of thing.
I see.
Well,
thank you.
It is about time for us to switch rooms, so I'm going to carry Maddie with me, and we're going to go to room 3.
Thanks for the questions, guys.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Not supposed to sleep with another person. Don't dare do that. My God, you'll get a millirem a year for that.
I'm so happy I joined this conversation right now.
Hi, Maddie.
Is it cumulative?
Yeah. So again, I mean, these numbers are so trivial that it's not even funny. Yet, people get really upset about it, and I don't even have actually here. Moving from Seattle to Santa Fe gives you an extra 50 millirem a year. I mean, come on, that should be illegal. You should not be able to move from Seattle to Santa Fe. It breaks all guidelines, breaks all regulatory requirements.
All right, Jim, we're going to go to room number 4 now.
Thank you so much. I will stop sharing.
Thanks, Jim.
You're welcome. Thanks. Good questions.
All right, room 3. Welcome to Madison. You guys all heard Maddie's introduction.
For your look, Scott, a year ago, and you cut your hair.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I just sent Carl a message. Let's see. I don't think I can move you. Let me try. I just sent Carl a message.
I'm here.
Oh, there.
I'll be able to do that. We're
Okay,
going to
great.
room 1. I'll see you around.
All right.
Thanks.
All right, Jim. So Jim Conker is with us.
Yes. And
Just give us a little information about who you are, what you do, and what you're wanting to talk about today. Take it, or feel free to take it away.
Okay. I see a few people that I know. Sean, good to see you again. You let your hair get away from you, but that's
Yeah. It's the COVID days.
that's okay. Yeah, boy, don't I know it. So I'm Scott Montgomery. As he said, I'm a prof at the UW. I teach courses in energy, some other subjects, but energy is by far my favorite.
Meeting we had to attend the last hour, so I missed the introductions. My apologies.
Hey, David.
Let's see.
Hi.
We're looking for Nick, aren't we?
Yeah, we're waiting for Nick.
Nick,
let's see if I can
Nick,
find
our
him.
expert.
Yeah. He's here panicking, and I don't see him. Let me go back to the main session.
Good old Zoom.
Yeah. Oh no. How do I get to the main room? There we go. I'm going to... What do I do? Now we're in trouble. Oh, here we go. All right. And we're going to room 2.
I'm back.
Yeah. Okay.
You're muted. Yes.
Hello, Catherine. I'm going to carry you with me to room 1. We have our breakout rooms now, so you'll get to talk to Scott Montgomery.
In the global landscape, because that is something that we don't read enough about in the United States. There are major things happening in other countries: China, Russia, India, Japan, South Korea, in the Arab world, and elsewhere in the former Soviet Union, but also in South America. So, but I am open to your questions.
All right. So I know Wendy had some questions that I think you are well positioned to answer. Wendy, if you feel comfortable jumping.
Unmuted.
Oh, okay, cool. Then go right ahead. And
thank you. Yeah, when I asked my questions of Madison, I basically found out that she's an evangelist rather than someone who wants to discuss the pros and cons and recognize there might be cons. I'm very concerned about the environment, and that's why I am open-minded on nuclear, because it's another carbon-free alternative. But I am concerned. One question I'd have for you is, because I perceive you're going to be less of an evangelist and more of an honest guy than Madison. I could be wrong in that perception, but what do you see? I guess I'd see, what do you see are the two biggest impediments to nuclear? One impediment with respect to technical. Like, the thing that comes to me as a concern is, how do we store this nuclear waste for 10,000 plus years when we don't know what the world's going to look like in 10,000 plus years? You know, if we don't get climate change under control, our quality civilization may deteriorate. So taking care of old nuclear waste is not going to be well done. So I guess, what do you see as the biggest technical danger or impediment at this point? And then also, I'm around so many people who are so concerned about the climate crisis, but they're still very anti-nuclear. By being open-minded on nuclear, I'm in a minority. So what would you see are those two things? Thank you.
Okay. Those are both very good questions. Let me take your first question. The technical hurdles to nuclear. I would say that we need to answer that question in context. I think you're speaking about the United States. If I can expand that to the United States and Canada, if I'm allowed to do that, I might be able to answer your question. The technical hurdles, there are no technical hurdles to building new reactors. There are technical challenges to Generation 4. Those reactors have not been built, have not been proven. So they need to have funding to be actually tested in a pilot project. That's not a technical hurdle exactly, but it does involve technical challenges. There is no technical challenge whatsoever about storing the waste. That is not a technical problem. That is a social and political problem. The waste could have been stored for a very long period of time. In fact, money was taken from reactor electricity sales for 30 years to create a central repository. There were over $32 billion collected, but the government never fulfilled its promise to carry out the full examination of areas where nuclear waste could be stored. And that's because of the political problem, the political situation. No state, every state has a veto say over a nuclear repository. That's very important. And no state wants to have it, not even Nevada, where despite its nuclear testing site, it doesn't want any more nuclear there. So it's not a technical problem. It's being done right now in Finland. They will be opening up their repository probably within the next 2 years. A country called Estonia, that you've heard of course, is now testing deep borehole disposal of nuclear waste. That has been around as an idea and a designed idea since the 1950s. Canada is now cleared a space at its Bruce nuclear plant in Ontario to begin a borehole disposal setting. In the United States, we tried to do, the Department of Energy, without getting any buy-in from people in the counties where it would have taken place, this is in North Dakota and South Dakota, went ahead and started a program to drill a test hole in each of those places for deep borehole storage of nuclear waste. And the counties went wild and prevented it from happening. We have a nuclear waste storage site in southeast New Mexico, in Permian salt, but it is only for low-level waste, not for the waste from reactors. It's mostly clothing and material that was affected by radiation, so very, very low radiation. Because the state will not allow them to put high-level waste there. So that's a very important point. It is not a technical challenge. It is not a technical hurdle. It is a political hurdle. So that's very important. And then your second question about changing people's minds or attitudes, that is very difficult. There is a very deep-seated fear of radiation. That fear is often fed by ignorance. The people that I've spoken with about it, and I talk to my students about it quite a bit. What do they know about it? And I do this with faculty too. I'm not going to name any names, but I could, lots of them, but I don't. What do they know about radiation? What are the forms of it? How dangerous are they to biological systems, to the human body? Very few people know that. And you find that the more they know, the less they are afraid. I mean, right, knowledge cures fear. Well, not always. There are also physicists who are very much against it. And why? I can't get them to give me a straight answer. Nuclear is a very unique subject, and radiation is even more so. Nuclear had gained a very negative reputation starting in the late 60s, but definitely in the 1970s. when there was great fear against the nuclear military industrial complex. I was part of it. I marched against nuclear power. I was put in jail overnight in Long Island against the Shoreham nuclear power plant, but I didn't know shit about it. I was a graduate student in a science, and I just did not learn the science. The reason I am talking to you now is because I did. Once I started at the University of Washington, I figured I had to learn about what I'm teaching. Imagine that. And nuclear was something I didn't know about. So I actually spent 10 years studying it and talking to hundreds of people around the country, not just nuclear engineers or nuclear physicists, but radiologists, cancer doctors, health physicists, all kinds of people who are involved. And the most striking thing that I was ever told was by a gentleman who works for the CDC, who told me, he said, look, I don't tell people what I do. My job is to direct this group of health physicists that set standards for federal buildings on radiation. Our standards are so low that if you went to Denver from Boston, you would be breaking every one of them because Denver is at a higher altitude and there are more cosmic rays. Our standards are ridiculous. He said, but they follow a rule as low as reasonably allowed. ALARA, it's called. And that's the government standard. So they make it lower than natural background radiation. That was the standard that the Japanese used in Fukushima, and that's why they evacuated all those people. And when they did that, they killed 1,000 people by pulling them out of critical care facilities. Not something that you read about very often with Fukushima, but that's the truth. No one is going to die from cancer, is the estimate at this point. Not even the workers who went in and were exposed to 10 to 100 times the radiation that the public was. So this is a difficult problem. And the only way I know in terms of solving it is to give people knowledge. It doesn't work every time. It's not a guarantee. It does work in the classroom, but not all the time. It is a real significant problem. In Europe, you have France, which is very on the side of nuclear, still to a significant degree. And then you have Germany, whose DNA is anti-nuclear. And I mean anti-nuclear. I don't mean, we don't need that. I mean, get it the hell away. You have two countries that are exactly opposite in their view of this. That's how complex it is. The United States is half and half. People of your generation, perhaps, Wendy, who are younger, they are very divided about this. My generation is generally against it, but people are coming around. The people who did join the anti-nuclear movement, a number of them have changed. But it remains a source of fear for a great number of Americans, a great many of people in the West. And this is the way I would put it. We created this in the West. We created this energy source, this non-carbon energy source, which produces enormous amounts of electricity with a very small environmental footprint. Very small, especially compared to any fossil fuel. And now we're turning our backs on it. But the Chinese are not, the Russians are not, the South Koreans are not, the Indians are not, the Brazilians are not, the Argentinians are not, but we are. And it's a shame because we definitely need it. It is by far the richest source of non-carbon electricity that humanity has generated. Wind and solar are our weakest sources. We don't have time for me to detail that, but it's very clear from from what are called the capacity factors, how much of the capacity for these sources you can actually get, how much light sunlight does solar actually convert into electricity. It's very small.
So I'm going to just quickly cut you off there. We have a number of questions that I don't think we'll have time to get into since we just got that 5-minute warning a couple of minutes ago. So I saw a question. Here. So could you comment quickly on the potential of modern reactors to use and consume spent fuel from early generation reactors?
Yes, absolutely. Those would be fast reactors that would generate the fuel. So spent fuel has about 98% of the original energy content. We throw that away for the most part. So if you put that in a fast neutron reactor, you would change the great majority of that into plutonium. And that is the source of resistance, because plutonium makes much better bombs than uranium does. So there's a concern there. And I guess, Wendy, going back to your question, that might be part of a technical challenge, because even the people who understand nuclear energy very well, that makes them very nervous, generating all that plutonium. But we have, in the United States, we have about 88, maybe 90,000 metric tons of spent fuel that could be turned into new fuels. And there was a program in the 1980s and early 90s called the Integrated Fast Reactor, which included taking fuel that was spent, generating plutonium out of it, and then burning it in another reactor. So you had a fast reactor, and you had a power reactor, an electricity generating reactor in the same complex right there. So you didn't have to store the plutonium or anything. By the way, that 90,000 metric tons would fit in about 2.5 garages. That's how dense uranium and plutonium are. Yeah. So you think of lead being very dense, but uranium is almost 3 times, certainly twice.
Any final words? I'm about to drag you out into room 2 for our final segment.
We did have one. Can I answer one other question?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So there was it looks like Mike B had his hand up. So if you want to quickly ask that, maybe we can just get a real quick answer for you.
Sure.
Well, I'd just point out that the 10,000 years for storing spent nuclear fuel isn't any type of technically arrived at thing. It was actually arrived at by people who wanted to make it as impossible as they could. If you just do the calculations for decay, after about 150 to 200 years, you don't need particularly any type of special handling of the fuel.
Yes.
After 300 to 400 years, it's no more radioactive than it was before it went into the reactor. It's just a different isotope mix.
Yeah, so all the very dangerous, highly radioactive fission products, they're dangerous because they're breaking down at a very fast rate, so they don't last long. So what he said is pretty much true. One other thing that I would point out to you is that we, in the United States, we pump underground hazardous waste to the tune of 9 billion gallons every year. Okay, and this is nasty shit. This is nasty stuff. This comes from pesticides, chemical factories, not chemical factories, chemical facilities, petrochemical plants. This is nasty stuff. You won't put your toddler in the bathtub with it, I guarantee you. And we pump 9 billion gallons of this underground every year. And yet we can't find a place to put the nuclear waste?
And it's interesting because I once heard a fun little adage, which is nuclear waste becomes less dangerous over time. Toxic waste does not.
That's exactly
Exactly.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Mercury will be mercury for a very long time.
I'm going to Shanghai this conversation. If Scott is so inclined to stick around after the last session, you absolutely can continue this. This is some great conversation. So
Yeah, you bet.
we'll see you for the last segment in our hour.
All right.
And so am I getting kicked out?
Yeah.
Hey, Scott.
If you can try to move yourself, I'll let you do that.
Yeah. What number? Am I going to 3?
Yeah, just the very next room.
All right.
Hey, Nick, go blue.
Go blue. Yeah,
Go
you saw I got my
There you go.
my tea. All right. See you later. Thanks, everyone.
Nick, is there any chance Bill Gates will get behind this?
We presented it to him once and he loved the idea, but it's a difficult business thing. No promises.
A floating plant? Is that what you pitched to him?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
All right. See you later.
Get going. Okay.
See you, Nick.
Bye. See you, Francesco.
Cool.
I was even advocating for renewables in college as an environmental sciences major.
Yeah, I'm from Minnesota originally. Oh, here goes.
Yeah, so I hope Nick shows up soon. I bet he's running on Linux because he is such a professional. Did
we lose him?
Oh, no. This is room 3, right? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm going to pull him in. All right, I'm going to pull Maddie to room 4 with myself. So thank you so
Maddie.
much.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
It was great.
Bye, Maddie.
Cool.
All right. Hello, everyone. This is Nick Duran.
All right. Everyone good?
Thanks, folks.
I'll
Thank
pull
you.
you to room 1, and I'll see you there, Jim.
Thanks.
Hi, Jim.
And
All
let's
right.
see, we should be getting Madison in our room.
There she is.
Yep. Hello.
Hello.
See you in a bit.
It would be one way to put it, by the media and by anti-nuclear activists over time, and I think it's just become part of that consciousness. But I do see that Jim has joined the room.
Yes,
so
in fact,
Jim,
I want to address that. Yes, the risk of radiation to the general public is 1,000 times lower than crossing the street.
Yeah. So, if you just want to introduce yourself real quick, and then we can jump into that.
Great. Well, I'm supposed to talk about nuclear waste, and I've been working on that for 35 years. I worked at Yucca Mountain for 25 years, one of the original authors of the license application to DOE. Very proud of the work, although Yucca Mountain is a stupid place to put anything, but that's that. I worked on WIP for 10 years. I started out as an exobiologist designing shielding for space colonies for NASA in the 70s. I have degrees in biochemistry and geochemistry.
Excellent. Okay, so let's see here. Eugene in chat said the average granite countertop is more radioactive than anything else the average person would ever see. I guess just kind of want to go over, the kind of how much nuclear waste there is, what its dangers are, and then maybe just to give us some perspective, if you happen to know, maybe what are some other, common everyday things that have similar, possible risks or higher.
Okay, that's a good thing about the countertop, but even better is potato chips. You know that the most radioactive food is potato chips. You know that?
I did not. I always thought it was bananas.
Nope. Potato chips. Okay, regular potatoes are below bananas, but when you cut them and dry them, remove all the water, you concentrate potassium 40 over 10 times, and it suddenly becomes the most radioactive food. I mean, 13,000 picocuries per bag of potato chips. Thinking, what the hell is a picocurie? Well, okay, that's another thing. So when you're talking about this stuff, background levels of radiation, they're no big deal, but they are 1,000 times higher than most of the regulatory limits, which is kind of insane because there's no difference between a 1 MeV gamma ray or one from nature or from man-made. It doesn't matter. Radiation is radiation. So background radiation is natural. Well, I shouldn't say that. Let me back up a bit. Background radiation from natural sources like rocks and food and cosmic rays and things like that is about 350 millirem per year on average. On top of that, we have about 250 extra millirem per year in general because of all of the medical radiological activities we do, which is kind of funny. I mean, that saves lives. It doesn't increase the risk of anything. And there are places around the world that have background radiation up to 10 rem. I mean, 10 rem, which is insane. But there's no increased cancer rates there. So in fact, there is no correlation between cancer rates, or certainly death, and background radiation levels across the world. There's no correlation at all. Now, there is correlation between cancer and food sources and things like that. Latin America has higher stomach cancer. Europe has higher lung cancer because they smoke like chimneys still. America has higher colon cancer because of all the meat we eat. So we can correlate cancer with a lot of things. We cannot correlate it with radiation. It takes a huge amount of radiation to cause health effects in humans, well over 20 rem acute. So it's been hard to do these studies and come up with numbers because it's so hard to see anything. So we always fall back to the Japanese bomb survivors or Chernobyl survivors. Of course, no one died at Fukushima from radiation, and no one ever will. There was never enough radiation released, and the Japanese government did something the Soviets didn't do. They actually said, hey, we got a problem right away. Don't eat anything for 2 months. And then as iodine-131 decayed away. So again, it's really hard to get these epidemiological studies. Every time we do, the risks are so low, we kind of have to tease out data, with high-level statistical programs because you just can't see anything.
Good to know. So on the question of, direct nuclear waste, what are we talking about in terms of total, mass or volume? How much are we talking about if we, took either the U.S. or just, global waste in general?
Right. We have more than anyone else. The Soviets are right behind us. There are four categories of nuclear waste. There's there's spent nuclear fuel from commercial reactors. That's the highest activity, but it's not high-level waste. Okay, high-level waste is only from bomb waste. It is only the high-level, high-activity waste from making bombs. It has nothing to do with commercial. So when people say high-level waste from commercial reactor, that's not correct. It's spent nuclear fuel. Okay, of spent nuclear fuel in America, we have about 80,000 tons, which sounds like a lot, but it's tiny. Okay, 2,000 tons could fit in my bathroom. So I'm not really, the volume is nothing because it's heavy. I mean, we're talking about uranium. So there's just not much commercial waste. Now, below that is high-level waste, which is bomb waste. It's when you're making bombs. I can go over what that means. It's an interesting thing. The first separation of all the junk out of the spent nuclear fuel from weapons reactors. You cannot make weapons from commercial reactor fuel. You know that, right? You cannot make a weapon from commercial spent fuel. It has to be from a weapons reactor because and you really want a graphite moderated reactor. So and none of our commercial reactors are graphite moderated. That's why Chernobyl was so bad, because it was a weapons reactor. People don't remember that. It was a weapons reactor. It was designed to make a ton of plutonium. It also made energy, but it was really to make plutonium. And they didn't have, and when you have graphite moderation, you have a real problem with risk. Okay, but light water reactors that we have almost 100 now. We had 104 at our peak, and you can't make weapons from that spent fuel. Now, from all those reactors in all of history of our commercial reactors, we have about 80,000 tons. Okay, so again, that's not even half of a small landfill. I mean, it's really nothing. Okay, now below that is a high-level waste from weapons, and we have about 100,000 tons of that. Okay, and it's that's the gooey green stuff you see on Simpsons. Okay, reactor waste from commercial reactors is solid. I mean, it's metal and ceramic. It's high temperature. I mean, there's no liquid in there. Okay, nothing can leak like the Simpsons. But the tank waste up at Hanford or Savannah River, a few other places, that's the weapons waste. That's the gunky junk. That's like peanut butter, like wet peanut butter. And so, that's the weird stuff. Okay. There's 100,000 tons or so of high-level waste, although most of it turns out isn't high level. And then the next category is transuranic waste, which is the purification steps in making a bomb, where you're purifying the plutonium and uranium. Okay, that's called transuranic waste, and all the waste associated with those processes are transuranic. There's about 160,000 tons of that, and that's all going to WIPP. You probably have heard of the Waste Isolation Pilot Project in New Mexico, where we've been disposing of waste, transuranic waste, some of it really hot as high-level waste, in the salts of New Mexico. The only place you should ever put anything. It was designed and built for all nuclear waste of any type from any source, but was only licensed and permitted in the 90s for transuranic waste. So, but again, we're talking 160,000 tons, not very much. And then below that is low-level waste, which is contaminated sand and junk and medical waste that's very low level, and that can go in a special low-level landfill. So anyway, so we're talking about a very small amount of waste. You only need one repository. There isn't enough to justify 2 or 3, especially if you're spending billions of dollars building it. And so the question is, what do you do? What do you do? Do you expand WIPP? Or do you go with deep borehole for spent nuclear fuel from commercial reactors? You certainly don't go with Yucca Mountain. It's the worst place you could put anything. And again, I'm one of the authors of the Yucca Mountain Project license application to DOE. Very proud of the work we did. It's just a stupid place to put anything. And so, because it's the wrong rock. And if you choose the wrong rock, now you're spending all your money trying to get around the fact that you picked the wrong rock, which was very funny. When we were all started on this in the 80s, we looked at each other and goes, what? They picked Yucca Mountain? Are you crazy? That's the worst one. But that's okay. That's what happens when you have the best scientists in Congress making choices like that. I'm supposed to get a laugh. So,
well, everyone's muted at the moment, so no, it was a good joke.
Yeah. So anyway, and that's really what it was. So again, scientists don't have any decision-making power. You all know that, right? And so when you're told to do something, you can complain a few times and then say, okay, well, we'll do it. If you really want it there, we can do it, but it's going to cost you because it's the wrong rock. So now, if it's the wrong rock, then you have to, spend $300 billion extra dollars for 7 engineered barriers to make the thing work, because the rock itself doesn't work. As opposed to WIPP, which was chosen purely on science, takes, again, 1 billion years for water to move an inch in this very thick, massive salt. And it's sodium chloride. I used to go down there and chop pieces off and make margarita salt out of it. It was very funny. It gets the conversation going. So this is the best salt, okay, in the world. It's the best place to put it. And we have 10,000 square miles of it. We only set aside 16 square miles in the Land Withdrawal Act for WIPP. And when WIPP is done, it'll only use a square mile. So you got 16 square miles already set aside for nuclear waste disposal in the best rock in the world. But the people of New Mexico say, hey, wait a second, you said it was only for transuranic waste, and now you want to put other stuff there? Well, actually, it was designed and built for everything. WIPP was designed and built for everything, including commercial spent fuel. It was only later that it became political and was licensed only for transuranic waste in the 90s. So again, it's just a weird thing. Now, alternatively, you can do deep borehole, especially for bomb waste will continue on into WIPP. That's great. Commercial spent fuel, if you really want to dispose of it, you can put it aside in dry cask storage, burn it later in fast reactors, recycle, whatever you want to do with it, or you can dispose of it. And if you do that deep borehole, that's great. I mean, we haven't done that yet, but we know how to drill boreholes that deep, even big enough to handle spent fuel. And the interesting thing about deep borehole disposal is that every state can have its own deep borehole disposal. You don't need to pick a state, because when you're 3 to 5 kilometers into the crust, there's no mechanism to get back out of that. I mean, there's absolutely no mechanism. So it doesn't matter where you put it. So now, because you're so far below the surface, so far below aquifers, so far below anything, that you can put it anywhere. So every state that has nuclear reactors, that has nuclear waste, can have its own borehole disposal. And of course, that scares the hell out of the representatives from those states, because they told their constituents they were going to get rid of this. That some state, like Nevada, was going to take all their waste. So when you come back and say, hey, wait a second, no one wants it, sorry, you're going to have your own. And by the way, you can just do deep borehole disposal anywhere in your state. Then they get really upset. Right? So, but those are really the two options. Those are the two options.
So this is maybe a smidge off topic, but Eugene asked if Yucca Mountain could be repurposed for something else, like the emergency seed repository, which I believe is up in Svalbard right now.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be great. Also, mushroom farming. It's absolutely great for mushroom farming, because contrary to most people think, it is dripping wet. Yucca Mountain, was chosen because it's above the water table, which right away tells you a scientist did not pick it, because if you're above the water table, you have free oxygen, and it corrodes your canisters overnight, okay, as opposed to below the water table where there's no free oxygen, it's reducing, or anoxic, and your canisters last 10 times as long. So no one in the world, except the United States, chose a repository above the water table. And so Yucca Mountain, so right away, it's like, but it is actually dripping wet. So we used to cut alcoves into the walls and close them up for 6 months, come back and open them, and 6 inches of water would rush out. It's this is not dry. This is not good. So so it's a dripping, fractured, dual porosity, variably saturated, oxidizing system. And I don't know what any of those words sound good, but they're not. Okay, they're not. It's just a lousy place.
It's basically just a bad place to store things long term, because it'll eat through it all. Essentially.
Absolutely.
So we've kind of gone over the questions that we had. If anyone else has anything else, I don't know how much you know about spent nuclear fuel and the possibility of like reprocessing it, for instance.
Quite a bit.
You have any?
Quite a bit.
Yeah,
so,
if you can.
So we actually built a MOX plant at Savannah River over the last 5 years, and then at the last minute killed it. Oh, that's par for the course. You don't need to recycle or reprocess. I mean, I know I'll probably get stoned by all the nuclear scientists, but you don't need that. Uranium is so cheap, it's so plentiful, and we are now perfecting how to extract it from seawater, which would make it as renewable as the wind. Okay, so we'd have a 1 billion year supply, and without mining or anything. So but uranium is so plentiful and so cheap, and uranium fuel, once through, new fuel is so cheap that there's no reason to recycle it. Again, and I hate to say that, because people think, oh my God, we're going to recycle. Now, we could burn it in fast reactors in the future, like Bill Gates is building, and that's fine, okay, because that would reduce the actual waste, and it would reduce the radiotoxicity tremendously. You'd only have to store it for 300 years, and then it would be fine, because if in a fast reactor you burn all the heavies, and all the heavies are what are the long term. Everyone talks about millions of years. Well, it's stupid. You don't need millions of years, but I know thousands of years. That's all the very low level, not very radioactive things like americium.
Which I'll remind people is already exists in your smoke detectors.
Yes,
Like
absolutely.
there's a bit of americium in every house with a smoke detector.
Right. and dose makes the poison. So again, there's no reason to recycle. If you want to, that's great. I like having the knowledge of how to do it.
Yeah.
I don't want to lose that.
I think the biggest argument for recycling I've heard is that, and this goes for fossil fuels as well, is that, people are trying to stop the mining process in general, the extractive process, because of the, related ecological effects that, that sort of mining tends to have.
Right,
now, granted, being able to take it out of seawater is an excellent alternative. But, I think just for the ecological reasons, recycling is a good idea, especially since we already have these hundreds of thousands of tons of spent nuclear fuel.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I agree. But the bottom line is there's so little of it that it almost doesn't matter.
All right, folks. Well, it looks like we have a couple more minutes if you want to stay in the breakout room and continue talking to Jim. Otherwise, feel free to leave and go back to the main room, and we'll be finishing up there.
I guess we got pulled in.
Yep.
Cool.
Oh, did I press the wrong button? Oh,
that's all right.
Okay.
We had 120 seconds.
We're here.
This interface is too simplified sometimes. Very sorry for interrupting your and chat and mics are free. So give me a moment and I'm going to give you all the time in the world to talk amongst yourselves and to join a new set of breakout rooms, which I'm going to recreate. Let's do 6 right now and let participants. So I'm not going to open them up yet because I want to give all of you information about what to do next. If you support the climate and anything said tonight makes sense, please consider supporting Maddie and the Green Nuclear Deal campaign. I'm going to put this link in chat. That is Maddie's Medium post about the Green Nuclear Deal. She'll be able to update that, or if you have another link, I can definitely take that. And great. Next, please support, if you're in Washington State, please support Senate Bill 5244. This is two $10 million tax deferments that will be targeted at startup companies for producing advanced nuclear energy. And I'm going to paste that link right after the gndcampaign.org. That's the Green Nuclear Deal. Awesome. And you can comment on this bill and tell your elected officials who have to listen to you what you think about the importance of nuclear energy. You can click that first link, the bill summary, to see more information, or you can click the next one to comment, the PBC Bill 5244 link that will let you comment to your representatives. And the final few things, please get involved with your nearest PUD, your nearest power planning board of some kind. We can all comment on the energy choices that are made in the future. And the last organization that I want to highlight is if any of us go away, if Seattle Friends of Fission doesn't make it, there is a pretty good national org that is focused on local action in the U.S., and that is Generation Atomic. So above all else, I want to thank Maddie for her time here, but as well, we can all know of and support as many of these pro-nuclear organizations, and so I just wanted to give Eric at the Generation Atomic a quick shout out. Thank you so much to Kevin, to Greg, to Kurt, to Brian and Paula, and David for helping set up the event and moderating. Thanks to Maddie and Scott and Jim and Nick for speaking. And now, please feel free to unmute your microphones and join the breakout rooms. And also, we can even screen share. So I'm going to open up these breakout rooms, and you all should be free to choose any room if you want to consider any conversations.
That's confusing.
There's a button at the bottom of your interface. Yep.
Our button disappeared.
Are you just choosing a random one?
Whatever you like. You can sit around here and talk with whoever is hanging out. I'm going to unpin.
Perhaps for future events, breakout rooms could have names.
Oh,
yeah, I agree. It'd be nice to know what the topic of the room might be.
Well, yeah. Okay. Let me try that again. Let's recreate these. Yeah. Let's do the first one. Will be Columbia Generating Station. That's going to be Washington's local plant, and let's going to do Byron and Dresden. Those are the plants that we're going to close next. Unfortunately, we'll go to Green New Deal. If you want to talk about the Green New Deal and nuclear's place in it. Any other topics?
Somehow we got to refresh our screen that shows the rooms, right?
I will open them up again and you'll see it.
Okay.
Fourth generation nuclear for the thorium.
No.
Nuclear waste. What about the waste? Nick's going to have a hard time.
What about the waste?
Yeah.
That should be Jim. Although I did buy whataboutthewaste.com.
Everybody wants to know.
It'll do nuclear in space if you're a futurist. So now you should be able to see all these topic rooms. I didn't hear any other suggestions, unfortunately. So.
Oh, that's good.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you all for
space. Which one's nuclear in space? I want that one.
You should see it there.
Thanks,
yeah.
Weird.
That's weird, Carl. We could see breakout rooms when we were in the breakout room, but we can't see it now.
Can't see it now.
Everyone wants to talk about space. Look at that.
That's a fun
Paula,
one.
what's your preference? I'll drag you in.
Oh, it doesn't matter. Send me to Maddie's. I guess let me chat with her if she's going to be in there.
The speakers might not stick around.
Paula, if you scroll to the bottom, Paula, click on the breakout rooms and scroll to the bottom. I think you'll see them.
I think Paula was having a problem with her interface.
Yeah, we're not getting breakout rooms unless we're in a breakout room. That's our problem. But anyway.
Yeah, unfortunately.
If you click on the more, then you can see join breakout room.
Right.
Oh, there you go.
You have to scroll down to the bottom.
Yeah, I'm at the bottom. I've got all kinds of good stuff. Screen share, chat, all the usual participants.
All right. I'll assign you to the Green New Deal room.
Okay, sounds good. Send us out. Great.
Well, it's both, isn't it? It is AOC originally said, and I have a great story I want to share. AOC originally said there is room in the Green New Deal for nuclear. Now, how did we get this terrible idea that it wasn't? If you remember, around November, December 2019, I believe, it was a bunch of environmental organizations were told, hey, sign this letter, it's for the Green New Deal. That letter was published by Friends of the Earth, who is an anti-nuclear organization.
Always have been.
It was a bait and switch, and that letter contained demands that there would be no nuclear, no carbon capture, and no carbon pricing. It was a bait and switch, and they fooled the national media on what the contents of the Green New Deal were.
Wait, wasn't there also like an FAQ released from AOC's office that said no nuclear? And they're like, wait, no. Like, that was a draft.
That was a big mistake. That was
The official Green New Deal is a tiny little 14-page pamphlet that doesn't say anything specific about anything. It's just a policy goal.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't exclude or include nuclear at all.
Yep.
But if you actually look at the first bill, it is a Great Society program, and it does have a tiny little piece of nuclear. But it's almost an afterthought.
A zero emission energy, yeah.
Yeah, and at the beginning of the Green New Deal, the Sunrise Movement was really anti-nuclear, and they really had to be brought around. I mean, like the Union of Overly Concerned Scientists
is still anti-nuclear.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right.
You know, they had to come around, and they did too. But they only turned around halfway. So
yeah.
AOC said something in an interview recently where she was talking about that nuclear isn't off the table. It just needs community buy-in, and I think there's an insight there where there's room for advocacy, like Maddie's talking about, and that kind of work to convince communities that there's room for this technology. And I think where nuclear plants exist, they're really popular.
Yeah,
I was going to say it's like a reverse. It's like a reverse NIMBY phenomena, where the closer you live to a nuclear plant, the more pro-nuclear you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
The communities that end up losing their nuclear plants are just devastated and don't fully recover. Like, Zion is one of them, and I think in Illinois, Byron and Dresden are both, painfully aware of that. And so the communities are some of the loudest voices that we are working with, putting up yard signs, doing letter writing campaigns, the whole thing. It's really inspiring.
Yeah, let's hope that it can work in some way. I mean, if it was supported as much as wind and solar by the government, then it wouldn't be such a problem. But the field is not level; it's faulted. Jim will understand this. There's a large normal fault and a huge scarp with nuclear lower and wind and solar raised. It's not a level playing field, and the problem, it's really true. The problem is that it's not valued.
And I hate this. I hate this LCOE. Lazar.
Yeah.
Lazard's numbers. Those are crap.
That is bogus. That is bullshit. That's a political document. It's not a.
I've got a great response to that. I mean, you know about discounting. Not everyone here knows about discounting. It's essentially the cost of financing. So if you believe in like taking the financial incentive out of profiting for nuclear energy, there it is right there. Put a 0% interest rate on your nuclear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably the other side of this is that nuclear is too big and important to be left to the private sector.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is.
The countries that really have brought it forward in since Chernobyl, are those that support it strongly from their capitals.
Mm-hmm.
It's big, but now with SMRs that can change. That makes sense.
Yep.
I would say,
it's especially new scales because they keep upping their power output. Right. Again, their 12 their 12 pack is almost 1,000 megawatts now.
Yeah,
I know. Rather incredible.
Yeah.
One thing I really wish the nuclear industry was even better about is advertising their small footprint as an ecological benefit.
Right.
And I mean, I work in river restoration and fisheries advocacy, freshwater habitat advocacy. And what we always worry about and what we're always worrying about is loss of biodiversity from loss of habitat and development. And when you think about the massive amounts of space and mining required for these diffuse energies, and you compare that to something like nuclear where we can compress it, the density becomes such a benefit. There's actually, once you get past that sort of historical baggage and bias against nuclear, you realize it's an incredible tool for actually leaving places wild. And the intersection with hydropower is incredible in that regard as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very true. What was I going to say?
For the stream, I've got Drax coal plant up on screen. Everyone can look at the Drax coal and biomass plant in the UK. It's enormous compared to even the half-built Columbia station.
Yeah, it's got like 11 or 12 cooling towers. Everyone thinks that it's a gigantic nuclear plant when they see it the first time, but it's got the biggest collection of cooling towers around. My wife and I have driven by it a number of times, and it is jaw-dropping. I mean, it's really something.
This is Jim Conca. I have to leave. I really would love to stay all night, but I gotta get back upstairs.
You got to get a haircut too.
Yeah. No. Look. I haven't had hair this long since Reagan's first term.
Oh my God. Now he thinks it's Samson.
But this is wonderful. Thanks, Carl. You guys did a great job.
Yeah, I'm going to have to leave too, so you'll have to find another joker for a little while.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, everyone, take care, and thanks very much to the people who came.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. And everyone else, just to remind you, if my image didn't remind you, I am still broadcasting to Twitch. I should have gone off to Twitter. I didn't do Twitter. Oh well. Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and a few other places. So, Jason has some great comments in chat, which the stream can see. Canada has at least the petroleum industry was found to be subsidized more than $1,000 per person per year. I believe it. Other countries like, what's Greta Thunberg's home? Is that the Netherlands? Switzerland? No. Sweden. They get a lot of their state income comes from selling oil. So it's what they fund. I see the nuclear and space room is really popular, and there's a few people at Columbia Generating Station. I might pop in there and say hi.
To get in there, man.
Yeah, cool.
I don't know how to get in there. If you could give me
if you click on the breakout rooms or find in your interface the breakout rooms area, you should be able to click join next to the name of each breakout room.
Which one? What's the name for the?
Columbia Generating Station is the breakout room that I was thinking of going to.
Okay, let me see.
Let's see if that works. Anyone else need help?
Enjoy the snow. So.
Yeah, I need help. I don't see nothing for Columbia.
Okay, I'll go ahead and assign you to that one.
Nuclear space. I got nuclear space. Okay. I got it.
Hey,
I hit it, but it doesn't happen. You help me. I help.
Okay. There we go.
Yeah. Okay, join.
All right. Thanks again, David. Good comments, Jason. Thanks for coming by. I'm going to go pop in to the Columbia room.
You don't get a lot of competition for wages. And if you do, like if they shut down Comanche Peak right now, all of those engineers that work there and all of the chemists, they would have to move into Fort Worth or Dallas or maybe Houston, which is quite a distance. I moved 2,000 miles to make sure that I could stay in nuclear. So, there wasn't anything else there. And I mean, I was leaving the really cool part of Texas. I certainly wasn't going to go to South Texas.
Yeah. And just to remind people that I am still broadcasting.
Oh, well, one of the problems I know that the politicians look at is and we talked about this earlier with, I think, Maddie, is the capital that's involved in building plants and that nuclear power plants don't start paying back on their investment as quickly as like natural gas does. And so I think that it's not just that they're wanting to generate jobs, but they're also looking at being able to get their money back. And they're not going to get it. They're not going to get it back right away with nuclear. That's part of the problem. And then we talked about how regulations could be changed or loosened to help. And I really am a huge proponent of the idea of cookie cutter reactors. Like if we could just get a factory assembly aligned to build cores and all kinds of stuff, that would be That, I mean, just because our plant was built so late compared to the rest of the plants in the US, when we need a part and we call another plant to see if they have one, they call us back and say, "You want what?"
Yes.
They don't even know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Although Oyster Creek does have our off-gas sample rack, and I want it back. I want their sample.
Yeah, you got to go tag it.
I know.
Yeah. I mean, that is one of those interesting things. And you know, like my last station was pursuing, we were going to do new build. Like we were all over it. We were going to do it. And then a couple of things happened. I mean, when Texas rolled to that merchant market system where now it's all profit driven, that absolutely killed both South Texas project and Comanche Peak because, well, it's profit driven now. And that's not, like you said, it's not going to be an immediate return on their investment. Then the next thing that kind of happened was the shale boom. The shale boom drove the price of natural gas down. Now we're making even less money. So we said, fine, we're just not going to do that. And it's not that the demand for energy went away. It's that the profit. And, you know, part of why I jumped over here was because it was a public utility. And while we do have to be cost effective, it's not as painful as being in a merchant market. It is a lot tougher to operate. And so what we kind of have to do when we talk to people and we advocate for nuclear policy is really get to that baseline of, do you really want to stay in the situation where energy is just like buying cars, that it is all based on profit? And that really inhibits us. Because I have the conversation and discussion online, and I've had it in person over in Seattle about, you know, what's the real barrier? Well, the real barrier is what we value as a society. Because this is a profit-driven industry across the board, whether it's renewable, fossil, or nuclear, being largely profit-driven inhibits our ability to really do the thing that we need to do. So we either agree that we need to take electricity and turn it into, you know, not a commodity. We need to consider it something that's more of a, you know, right, that you have to have this, we have to have energy to survive, and simultaneously acknowledging that either climate change is real or air emissions are bad. Both of those, I don't care which one you agree with, because if you agree with it, either one being bad, we can still get to the same end. Then it becomes a little easier to say we are going to build another Vogtle because we have to have it, and we've decided we don't care how much it's going to cost because we have to have this power to survive. And that will push a ton of different projects, and that's when you will see real R&D come out, because we've decided we value this as a society, and it's not going to be based on what the market share is worth. That's my opinion. It might be a little communist, I guess, but that's the thing. Like every time we talk at a nuclear power plant about making an improvement, we have to talk about what's it going to cost. Mm-hmm. And it's a huge barrier. And like we just talked about at our plant, we have, our company is a public utility. We sell our power at cost. So we're not answering to shareholders, but
Hey, do you need me to move you to a room?
Yeah, we were just moderating a room. Brian and I started Seattle Friends of Fission. We're both actually retired medical workers who became really involved in working on environmental issues. We actually joined a local 350 chapter and ended up getting really frustrated and did a lot of research and just started realizing, wait, we're talking to people and we don't have any solutions, or our solutions are fantasy land, you know, and with renewables, and we want to talk about nuclear. And so we started Seattle Friends of Fission, and we've been meeting people around the area who have expertise, like Jim Compton, Scott, Nick. We met all those guys around town giving talks, and done that for about 4 or 5 years, I think it's been.
Oh, at least.
Hey, Carl.
Oh, pretty good. Do you need me to move you to another room?
Yeah, Gary, you want him to move you? It's Jason, pardon me. Do I have the wrong name?
Jason would like to go to waste guy first and then new nuclear person.
I think, unfortunately, Jim Conca, you heard him speaking in here, and I can move you to the nuclear in space is where Nick Duran is at. So, Jason, you want me to move you?
Not really my bag, nuclear in space.
Yeah. Yeah, he might.
What are my options?
I see 4 people in the Green New Deal room, and a big handful in the Columbia Generating Station. But yeah, there are a few advanced nuclear advocates in the nuclear and space room, so you might get what you want there.
Okay, cool.
I'll move you nuclear in space.
Thanks. Nuclear in space.
Paula, Brian, or Jerry, do you want me to move any of you?
Where do you want to go? You want to go? Is Madison still on somewhere?
No, she had to go. It's pretty late there in the Midwest.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Put us. I don't know. Where do you want to go?
Oh, nuclear in space.
Oh, okay, we'll go back. We'll go to nuclear in space. We'll join the gang.
All right.
Well, I've gotten lots of good comments from friends. So
awesome.
Yeah, you've done a great job, Carl.
Jerry, any requests? Well, actually, I think I'm going to take this opportunity to close the stream, say goodbye, and turn off my broadcast so that everyone is a little more freer when I'm in the room. So thanks, y'all, for stopping by. Please check out Seattle Friends of Fission on Facebook, Seattle Friends of Fission on Meetup, as well as Your Environment Seattle, everywhere that broadcasting happens online. Thank you so much for checking out our event. I will see you all